You just stand up and just say good morning to those around you, will you please? Good morning. Don't want to interrupt any friendliness. We need all the way we can get. So there was a little boy. It went and he was just thinking, trying to put some things together. Just a little fella. Went to his mother and came up with that question. I think all mothers dreaded how they're ever going to answer it. But he came in and asked her, "Mom, where did I come from as a baby? And where did you come from as a baby?" And his mother thought real quick, how's she going to explain this? And told him a tall tale about a beautiful white feathered bird that flew into their doorstep one day, and on with the story. And the boy took it all to heart and thought, no, that's got to be more. And went to his grandmother's house and said, "Grandma, where did you come from? How did you get here?" And she proceeded to say the same kind of a story with just a slight variation about a big white bird that flew down to her doorstep and so forth and so forth. The little boy went outside to one of his playmates and said, "You know, there has not been a normal birth in our family for 3 generations." Well, I think that might have been some of the feelings that Elizabeth had. She got the news, Mary's going to have a baby under most peculiar circumstances, and she's going to have a baby in her advanced years. What is God doing? Doing some remarkable things as well. Well, let's read this story. It's found in the Gospel of Luke and chapter 1. We're working our way through this story, so we're kind of picking up in the middle of it, so to speak. So my first verses will be where we left off last week with Zechariah. But reading the story, Luke chapter 1, picking up with verse 19. Now the angel said to him, this is Zechariah, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day that this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he stayed so long in the temple. And when he came out, he could not speak to them. And they realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them, but remained unable to speak. And when his time for service was completed, he returned home. And after this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant, and for 5 months remained in seclusion. "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "In these days he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people." Verse 39. Well, at that time Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. And when Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. In a loud voice, she exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child that you will bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? And as soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her." And may God add the power of the Spirit to the reading of this word, that it becomes alive to us today, to bring us into the story, to see the splendor of God at work. You know, back some years ago, back in the 60s, 70s, there was a stage play called Godspell. I don't know if any of you have seen that. It goes back a few years. It was quite controversial. I thought it was very insightful. And I went to see one of the stage plays, and it seems around the country, different drama groups took liberty with how they put it all together. And there was variations wherever you went. The particular play I saw, it started out this way, where you had the various actors, I think there was 8 or 9 of them, came out and just took their places on the stage. And each of them had on a sweatshirt. And on one sweatshirt it said, mortgage. Someone else came out and said, fame. Someone else came out and said, prestige. Another came out and said, economics. And everyone had a different sweatshirt. And then almost on cue, they all started their individual routines. The first person started movement with her hands and feet. This is a stage play. You have to imagine it. Moving her hands and feet, saying, pay that mortgage, pay that mortgage. And the next person would say, climb that corporate ladder and do her signs. And each one of them would do this in a different beat, a different tone. And it was awful. It kind of hurt your ears, just pure chaos and confusion. But do you see what it represented? All the different people pursuing all these different worldly ventures. All these different worldly things they thought would drive their life. And then while they're doing this cacophony of sounds and confusion, somebody gets up. You didn't notice him before. It was John the Baptist. And he gets up in the middle of all these people doing their routines. And he's just kind of looking at them, bewildered. But they all have a stone face. They're all determined they will climb that corporate ladder. And then John the Baptist, looking at all of them in the middle of the stage, just begins singing out, prepare ye the way of the Lord. And then he just keeps singing this. And the different people, they're doing their routine. And after a few moments, it starts breaking down. The one person says, climb that ladder. And another person says, pay that something. And slowly, each one of the individual actors begins breaking down in their worldly pursuit. And John the Baptist, they're still singing a song. Prepare ye the way of the Lord. And they all just stop and they stare at him. And then one at a time, they pick up the song. And they start singing it, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Until finally, all of them are singing it. And then on cue, they all take their sweatshirts off and throw them off the stage, and they've got the gaily decorated costumes they wear underneath the sweatshirts. But that's how the ministry of John the Baptist starts out, and I thought, what a very fitting way that is to explain it. In the midst of all of our worldly pursuits, whatever it may be, our fame, our money, our prestige, or whatever it may be, Jesus Christ comes in the midst of this and say, are you ready for a new adventure? Are you tired of that old way? Are you tired of tapping all those old machines of trying to find happiness? Are you ready to try Jesus' way now? His promise of peace and hope. His promise of genuine joy and fulfillment of our spirit. That's what this story is all about. Jesus entering into our world with a reason, a purpose. Have you ever thought of that? Why did Jesus come into our world in the first place? Do you think he was bored up in heaven and nothing else to do and said, well, let's just try this just for the fun of it? But he has a definite mission. Creation has been lost, and God is seeking a way to bring creation back to him. That's called redemption, redeeming humanity back to the intentions that God has always had for the human race. And he begins his work with Gabriel. He goes to Zechariah. He goes to Elizabeth. He goes to Mary, to Joseph, getting all of these different parts ready with the same message. Prepare. Get things put in order. Do that introspection you need. Think about it. That's why I love so much that Zechariah has got 9 months where he's not talking. He can't say a word. And this is the time he's got something to talk about. I've seen an angel in the temple. I've got a son coming. All of these great things, and he can't pronounce one single word about any of this event. He's not able. And it's all kept inside of him. And it's time for introspection, seclusion, solitude, stillness, to take it in. And when he can finally speak again, when his son John is born, He's able to proclaim it loudly, all of these praises, and he's got the Benedictus stuffed inside of him. And it comes out, this psalm recorded in the Gospel of Luke toward the end of chapter 2, this great proclamation of faith. And for Elizabeth, it happens to her as well. She discovers she's pregnant, and for 5 months, she's in seclusion. Takes herself out of that loop of boasting and said, look at me, look what God's done for me. And it's just put away. And just time to think about it. Time to meditate. Time to some self-introspection. What's inside of me? Am I ready for this great adventure that God has for my life? Have any of you ever been on a spiritual retreat where you had to take a vow of silence? Any of you tried that? It's a wonderful experience if you've never done it. Sounds kind of scary and kind of funny right at first. But when you do that, you just make a commitment. For 24 hours, none of us will say a word. If we see each other, we'll just nod hello, and that'll be our understanding of that. But when you can't say anything, you committed yourself not to talk. That forces you to do more thinking inside, a little more meditation, a little more introspection. Instead of looking out at other people to see what's wrong with them, there's more looking inside of me to say, where do I need improvement? Where can I build up my own spiritual life? And it's always that way with God's people. When God calls Paul, knocks him off his horse on his way to Damascus to persecute the Christians, Paul says later in the book of Galatians, after that event, did you know I went to Arabia for 3 years? Arabia is not a big tourist spot today, and it wasn't a tourist spot in Paul's day either. It was a place for solitude. It was a wilderness. Before Jesus began his public ministry, he spent 40 days in the wilderness. Israel, before they got to the promised land, 40 years in the wilderness there too. Exploring the promised land took 40 days. Time of waiting, time of introspection. The apostles have to wait in the upper room for the day of Pentecost to come. Martin Luther, before the Reformation, has to spend his winter in the Wittenberg Castle. All of these events have to have a season of waiting on the Lord. Isaiah defines it very well. Isaiah 40:31. But those who wait or hope in the Lord, they will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run, and they'll not grow weary. They will walk, and they will not be faint. But they need a time of gaining energy, a time of preparing, a time of building up our faith, to trust in God, to stay the course, and to not give up, but to be ready, to be prepared. That's what this time of Christmas calls us to, is to be ready, to be prepared. There were 2 men at church talking in a church foyer, and one man asked the other, what are you going to get your wife for Christmas this year? I'm kind of working through, wondering what I'm going to get. And the man said, oh, I don't know. You know, what I'm thinking about doing, I'm going to get a big fluffy bow, tape it on top of my head, and come to her and say, honey, here's your gift. And the other man said, yeah, I'm not going to get my wife much for Christmas either this year. But being ready, thinking it through, making sure everything in my life is set for a fresh experience of Jesus Christ. Are you tired of the same old thing? Do you want something fresh from God that brings life to your mind, your soul, your spirit, to your body, that makes you excited and joyful once again? It calls us to pay attention to details, pay attention to my life. What am I doing to cultivate that kind of experience? What am I doing to cultivate spiritual life in me? And not to be quite so presumptuous about all these things, but pay attention. This past week, there was big news in the internet circles. You may have heard about this. Hackers have been at it again. They scored big this time. 1.6 million login credentials. They're stealing passwords. It's a global event. These were taken all around the world. And different groups got involved. TrustWave, they're an internet police force. They began tracking it down. What happened? Where are they? How do we catch up with them? How do we block out this information from their own computers? They traced it all the way back to Europe, And then TrustWave found out something very interesting, how they did it. Do you want to know how they cracked all of these login accounts? How they got people's passwords? Let me give you the top 5 passwords that people have been using. See how ingenious you think this is. The number 1 password that people have been using on their internet sites is, ready for this? You might want to write this down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Number 1 password. Number 2 most popular password. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Did you guess that? Number 3 most popular password. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, the number 4 most popular password, here's something a little different. The number 4 most popular internet password is password. That's the password. Password. That's what they put in there. And now I'm going to test you to see if you can figure out what the 5th most popular password is. These are supposed to be secret. The 5th most popular password has 5 digits in it. Anybody want to take a guess what it is?
0.
No, it's got 5 digits. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. You're one of those hackers, aren't you? TrustWave scolded all of their accounts saying, this is not what we're talking about when we told you to be secretive of your passwords. Change them. Make a note. I read this article. I had to go back and change my passwords too. No, just kidding. I try to be a little more careful than that. But people are that careless about all their internet possessions. All of their bank accounts, checking accounts could be tracked by all of these simple things. Taking time to prepare, paying attention to what's going on around me, not to be so presumptuous. You know, we live in a difficult world. People are having a very hard time around the whole world. Politics has got issues. Our healthcare got issues. Economics, we got issues everywhere we go. General Social Survey, this is a big outfit. They rival the Pew on their research they do. They did a very disturbing poll, national poll across America. And the question was basically this: do you trust people? How many people trust others? Now, back in 1972, they did this survey, and the answer they had back then was that people trust other people 65% of the time. That's a pretty high number. Generally trust people 65% of the time. Today, 2013, that number has dropped to 33%. Do a little math there. That's telling us 67% of people do not trust other people. People are afraid in this world. People are not so sure about this world. That's not the way God designed it. That wasn't God's plan. God has a plan in sending His Messiah into this world to restore trust, to restore hope, to restore joy, to restore people working together, loving each other, supporting each other. This is the way of Christ. To do anything otherwise is the way of the world, and that breaks God's heart. That's not the way God meant this world to operate. And it all starts with Jesus Christ. He's the reason we're doing all this. He's the whole point of our salvation. The whole center of our hope is what He has provided for us to bring us this hope of everlasting life. It's that joy of salvation. And when we leave Him out of the mix, we're leaving out the whole point of it all. We're missing the whole story when Jesus is not there. He's the point of the whole season. There was a town up in Minnesota. I was very amused by this story, very heartwarming in a sense, and wonder about the rest. But it's a little town that had a wonderful mayor. He just served the people faithfully and did it for years and decades, and they just got used to letting him take it, and he did a good job, got to know everything, and everything worked well. And finally, he just announced, I just can't do it anymore. I'm just too tired. I've got some health issues. I really need to step down. So people were hurt, disappointed, but they understood. And so they were going to have a great party for him. They rented out the local VFW hall and invited the whole county. People came from all the surrounding towns just for his party. They had loud music and dancing and a lot of tasty finger foods and pastries and other refreshments. And it was just a great evening for everyone. Everyone had a great time. It was on the news. It was in the newspapers, and just a great event. And everybody was so glad they could do this for their beloved mayor. And the next morning, people were in the coffee shops and talking about the night before, saying, wasn't that a great party? And everybody said, that was the greatest party I've been to in a decade at least. And someone said, well, I hope the mayor appreciated that. And then someone else said, well, what'd the mayor say about it anyway? I don't remember him making any comments. And someone else said, well, I'm not sure what the mayor had to say about it either. And they got talking to one another, and then it dawned on them, no one had even seen the mayor. Then they found out the afternoon before he'd had a heart attack, went into the hospital, and he wasn't even there. Having this great party, and the whole center of the focus was not even present. How hollow that event became for all of them, missing the whole point. Is that a parable for us today? To be careful that we don't miss the whole point of it all. That is Jesus Christ, the hope that he brings for us. That's what changes everything. For Elizabeth, she caught it. She got the message. God is doing something important in our world. It's been a few decades, a few centuries since we've heard from him. But now he begins. He's doing it through me. He's doing it through my cousin Mary. He's working through my husband. All of these things are coming together. And Elizabeth gets it now. And she receives a guest, Mary, the mother of Jesus. And she comes. And as soon as she hears the voice of Mary, the baby inside of her recognizes this is somebody special. He is the forerunner of Jesus. He is one who will proclaim his coming. And Mary, it says, and I love this, you got to picture it. Mary's in Elizabeth's house, and it's probably not a great mansion, just a very modest home. And Elizabeth says in a very loud voice, can you see that? How blessed this situation is. How blessed you are. How blessed I am. That excitement in her, and she cannot contain it, that Jesus Christ is coming into our world. What a truly exciting time that is. How we need to restore that joy ourselves, to be excited that God is doing something special in us today.